Okay, so the other day we started looking at a few more things in CSS in detail. I remembered pretty quick why my original plan had been to start with colors and then move on. Oh, there she is. Oh, wait till she comes back in. I do that too. Okay, yeah. So we looked at fonts the other day. In particular, the textbook showed how to use fonts that are on the machine, but that's a dangerous thing to rely on. So we looked at how to include fonts like you would any other resource. The images that you want to show on your page, you include those when you on your server to go with the files. It's a really good idea to do fonts the same way. But my notes from the other day had started with colors and just kind of drifted away from that. And I remembered very quickly why I started with colors, because that was on the assignment the other day. That was on the assignment that was due today, so probably should have been in separate colors, but we'll talk about these a little. It's an ongoing process. You may have noticed in the homework, at least for the first two modules, how it used the same files. Started some stuff in chapter 2, then in chapter 3, you cleaned it up a little, added a few more things to it. And that's what the homework for the whole semester is going to be. There's case studies in every chapter that relate to those sites. So it's just going to pretty much keep building. Sometimes we have to do side steps because things are like alternative versions to each other. So they don't necessarily build on top of each other and go back a couple weeks for the previous files, but it's just it'll be an ongoing process. So we've got a few things to look at with CSS today. We'll look at colors. Yeah, I added a list. It's probably going to be the next couple days. More selectors. We'll look at a couple more selectors, the class and ID, which were mentioned in the homework. They're straightforward. They're not the complicated selectors yet. We'll see those soon. Some of the ones that are incredibly useful that the book doesn't put in there, I want to make sure and look at some of those before the end of the semester. We're just going to look at some of the easy ones today. Colors, I probably should have started, my notes started with that the other day, and I jumped ahead to the middle of the section on the notes. Some more stuff with selections, special characters, and a note I like to make about colors once we get to the end after we look at some stuff. To start with, the main thing on those notes you noticed was a bunch of selectors and colors. So we need a web page to do some stuff with. So I'll draw a rough idea for one. I meant to grab colored markers. I'll just do sort of an outline thing. So one thing I like to do, and our textbook does it as well, is the body tag. That's part of the requirements. That has to be there. We don't have as much control over the body as we would over other tags. So a lot of developers like to put a tag right inside the body that takes up everything, the whole page, that we have full control over. So we have control over everything on the page. I'll use a content tag for that. And we have those useful names for the first 25 years or so of HTML. The only way we had to split up our page was the div tag, the division tag. So we might end up with a whole lot of divisions on a page. That's some 3D. Close one of them, or close a couple of them. Maybe open another one. Close that one, and I think I'm back to the beginning. Yeah. Indenting can be helpful. Whoops. Indenting can be helpful to keep track of the opening and closing tags where they go together. Usually that can get to be kind of a mess, especially when we get down to the closing tags, because the opening tags will have attributes in them. They may have classes and IDs, something to identify them, but the closing tags all look exactly the same. It's easy to lose track of it. So That's the idea of semantic tags, which is just useful names. They are not restrictions. We can put them together any way we want, but you're the one writing the code. So if you put them together in a strange order, like put your header down at the bottom of the page, put all your main content in a footer, you're only going to confuse yourself when you look back at that code 6 or 8 months later. So I'm going to use content for the overall one. I think our book might use main. Can't remember which one they use. Then need some other stuff. I'll do a section tag up at the top with at least one paragraph in it. This is going to relate to some of the selectors we're going to use. I'll do an article container with, again, at least one paragraph in it to express a point. Actually, towards the end of class today, but we'll see it shortly. Then maybe at least one paragraph that's not included in one of the other containers. And I was going to use classes and IDs, which we're looking at those, so we're going to swap those out depending on the paragraphs and stuff once we get some style rules in there. And maybe a footer at the bottom. And I'll stick a paragraph in that as well. Another thing, the basic idea for something that we can add color, put some random words on there, and then we'll add colors. Look at the different ways we have to set up colors. Yeah, it should be good. Here's we can go ahead and make that web page. Oh, better let this computer in the Zoom room. Oh, before I forget, real quick here, I was glancing at the discussion boards just a few minutes ago before that latest one when I replaced is the original Stackaway Core shell was something that's a little outdated. I was free hosting sites, and I did think of another free hosting site that some of y'all may be aware of on a GitHub repository. Several other repositories, CNET, I know has several. But in GitHub repositories, you can get at least one domain for each of your repositories. It's not going to have a good name because the point of that is to be documentation for the projects that you put on a code repository. But if you go in settings and I think under pages, yeah, you can activate GitHub Pages, and that is another place where you can get some free domain hosting that would work for class. The nice thing about that is this is a major code repository, so its uptime is really good. There's a lot of effort making sure that this site pretty much never goes down. There's programmers all over the world. This is the main one they use, so that's a free one with really excellent uptime and stuff. Just one more on the list, scattered around. The main point in the discussion boards, I believe, the main point with the free domain hosting, I think at least one person mentioned in discussion boards, maybe a couple, maybe it was in there a couple times, but you get what you pay for. In school, we're going to school, we kind of got to work with free ones. But also remember when after you graduate and you're making really good software developer money, things like paying for a domain host are a business expense. And you want lots of business expenses to itemize on your taxes every spring when you're making lots and lots of money. Because the IRS, the more money you make, the bigger a chunk of it the IRS will want from you. So once again, I'm going to use the Atom text editor. I did a factory reset over the weekend. That's only text editor I install on here. I should probably install some others. Oh, I can close these. Close that. I already copied that. I'll save. Close that. Close that. Add another project in here. New folder called class stuff 22. Oh, did you all notice that today's palindrome? 2/2/2022. If we put a 0 here. Oh, that's not where 0 goes. Oh no, not quite a palindrome. When I was typing that, it's like, oh, it looks like palindrome, but it's still missing a 0. But it's almost the same backwards if we flip around that 0 there.
Remind your students that they're going to use even remotely with computers here on the on-trust, they need to submit an application to the help desk.
Okay. Just a reminder that I guess he's getting ready to shut down the account. So if you plan on using the computers here, even remotely, you'll want to set up your account very, very soon. He came in here to give the reminder explicitly, so I'm guessing that he's getting ready to do that. Yeah, lots of twos in today's date. For a second, I thought it was the same backwards, but it looks like we're 1 digit off of that. So set up a new project here. And whatever text editor you're working in, you should be able to have some features to set up projects, but really that's just a folder. You can do that in the normal file explorer. But you want to keep things organized because stuff will grow very, very quickly. So I'll go over to this project, create a new file. And I guess one more reminder that I'll probably stop saying this. You'll have heard me say it a few times, probably well aware of it by now, but we call our file index. The Linux server will open the file called index by default. We can change that and have it look for another one, but it's a lot easier just to call the file index than to go in and do all the Linux server admin stuff to change the name of the file it opens by default. So most of your folders are going to want something for the home page called index. And that's new for every folder. So when there's something called index.html or index.php or index.asp, any of the normal, I'll put quote marks on that, normal websites, if it's called index, the server will open that with just the folder name, then we don't need the file name for it. So then the stuff we've seen before, Atom's kind of nice. It's only need the letters HT to kind of set up the whole template for a web page in Atom. Which, by the way, the HTML5 standard is JavaScript, and the Atom text editor I'm using here, that was a public project built on GitHub by lots and lots and lots of programmers, and it's developed in JavaScript, fully open source. So if you want to customize the text editor, JavaScript is an official standard, so you're probably going to need to study that at some point. So the Atom text editor is built in JavaScript, customize the features and stuff. So we need a name. I'll put the title on here. Color examples. That's mostly what we're going to talk about. And then I'll come down here and kind of put together what is in this picture. And in English, the language we're used to, we work left to right, top to bottom. But we're not working in English here. We're in HTML. So left to right, top to bottom might not be the best order. I like to kind of work from the outside inward, especially with the tags, even if not using the predictive text. So like on that content tag, oh, it doesn't know that one. I usually like to do the opening and the closing tag and then come back inside it to do whatever's next. Instead of starting at the top and working downward like we're writing an essay or something. You can just be more productive overall to jump around and put things together in the order your mind thinks about them in. Not necessarily the order the computer needs them in. What I put here, I've had a section or a division of the page. I'm pretty sure that one is on there. Yeah. So let's use the predictive text. And it's a good idea to let the computer type as much as possible. The computers never make typos. Humans are the ones that make typos. And there's a footer down here. Well, there's a paragraph. It's not inside of anything. And then there's a footer. Whoops. There's some sort of paragraph in it. Here's the footer. And the main point for today is colors. So colors and selectors for CSS. So we're just gonna work with some random words. There's no need to say anything in particular, I suppose. I go on a bunch of words though, so that they loop over. You might know what the standard is for random words. You've probably seen it before. Might as well look at that. One of the things we talked about the other day was some of the early printing stuff. The EM units, those go all the way back to Gutenberg. That's that was the measurement on the original movable type. Been around for quite a while, and it's still a very useful one. It takes some getting used to, but your sizing, if you use the EM units, your sizing is always based off the pattern, which will keep things consistent, screen to screen, device to device. Another really old tradition in printing is we just need some random words. It's like, okay, we don't have some actual content here. Like here today, we're looking at colors and selecting things with CSS. We just need random words, which is something that's been around since printing started. So we need random words. So back in the early days of printing, in the 1500s, 16th century, Joel, need something? Okay. Looked like they were looking for something important, like something got lost. So in the 16th century, somebody needed some random words. So he took this traditional Latin text and jumbled it up. So some parts of it are Latin words, some parts of it are gibberish. The first two words, Lorem Ipsum. Ipsum's the Latin word, but lorem is only half of the word delorem. The original text was something written way back in Rome about dealing with depressed people. That's not an issue when you have like a family member that's suffering severe depression and stuff. Tips on how to deal with it. So that's not a modern thing. That's been around for as long as people have. Depression is quite natural for people apparently. The way we deal with it now is much different than that Roman writing about it, but he mixed up the things and kept it in that pattern of a language. So certain letters get repeated a lot more. The vowels are going to show up a lot more than consonants. Words come in different lengths. So it made a good filler text because it's what text will look like. And there are lots of generated, it's still what we use. We just need nonsense text to see how things are gonna lay out on the page. So I just Googled Lorem Ipsum, and this one been going to for years, loremipsum.io. It's just sort of a generator. 5 paragraphs, that sounds good. So generate those. And here's 5 paragraphs worth of just filler text. So I'll do the click 3 times to select the whole paragraph. I'll just copy that over. Copy, then in the section tag, I'll put a paragraph up here. And again, I like to do the opening and closing paragraph and then come back and put the thing in between. So there's the first one. There's some extra line breaks apparently. And the next one, you can see if you look at it, there's some Latin words and some nonsense, but it looks like a language. Just if we quickly glance at it, the ratio of vowels to consonants, big words to small words, looks about right. So that's why it makes a very good filler text. And there are some really nice generators. There's some that are quite funny. They'll throw in regular words. When I saw some point in the past, it started with the actual original version of it, or at least the oldest version known. And then they took several sub orders and mixed sub orders in there. So it's like a bunch of filler text, and then there's randomly mention of sub sandwiches and the toppings for that. So whenever you need filler, which you will at some point, just to see what colors look like and how the stuff's going to lay out on the page, that's a good one to kind of go grab. I'll put another paragraph down in here. And one more of that. Oh, I counted the one in the footer when I counted 5. I might as well do Lorem Ipsum that way, so I'll put one here as well. So get that save and pull it up and kind of see what that text looks like. It's a lot easier than just making up random words to put in there. Last couple classes, you all saw me do that. And sometimes it's hard to just come up with random words to put in there, especially if you want nice long paragraphs where you have line breaks and things like that. So there's some words on the page. That's the first part of it. It's always going to be the first step when you're developing a web page. Put your data in there. So first thing is get the words and encode them in HTML so that we're ready to start doing stuff with them. Because HTML is a type of thing. For those who have done any work in the C family of languages, you've probably dealt with generics along the way, which is a place where we regularly use angle brackets to define the type of thing we have. And it is the opposite of a coincidence. It's very explicit reasons why we use the same notation in our markup languages. You might remember the other day I suddenly referred to C++ talking about what CSS is and why we have this semicolons and curly braces. they're very connected. Just we don't have the whole language because we're just encoding stuff here. We're just putting in a few instructions, and then the given stuff that's always going to be the same is already prepared and running in the background of the browser for us. So we just have to worry about the parts that are going to be different, like the words on the page. So we put the words on the page and then use HTML to encode them into different types, so the computer can identify different groups of the wording. So like, I guess they're almost all in paragraphs. But up here, there's a couple of paragraphs inside of a section. So that's a type to uniquely identify each one of those things. And that's what we're doing with these. Because then we can start adding some style to it, making it look a little bit better than white words on a, or black words on a white background. That's what stuff looked like traditionally because of paper, but we can definitely do better in our modern world with computers. There's a lot of colors we can get to. So now I'll add another file for a style sheet, another file to this project. And I mentioned this the other day. There's one line I always like to include. I'm gonna see if the problem pulls up and do this. Background color. Oh no, just the green on there. Oops. Guess I have to save that first. Color.css. It's probably not going to cause a problem. It's inconsistent. It doesn't seem to happen every time, but it's really, really annoying when it happens. So, and it's really, really easy to avoid. So I always just go ahead and throw the avoid thing in there. So to connect our HTML to our CSS, we saw this before. We have to say what the relevance of it is. Well, it's a style sheet. And we can either source external data or hyperlink reference it. And with our style sheet, we don't need all of the style rules every time. That probably applies to an entire website, not just a web page. It's how we make everything on the site appear to belong together. So we just need part of the rule. So we use a hyperlink reference. It's in the same folder, so we don't need any addressing, but we will talk about addresses soon. I think our textbook mentions 2 ways of setting up addresses, and we have way more than that. We'll see quite a few more in class. And I'm gonna go ahead and throw this other one in, that since CSS is the official standard, we could leave this off, but it's not covered anywhere in the curriculum style like specification. That's something called Mime Type. Remember in TCP, our data is broken down into pieces. Those pieces travel independently across the network and get reassembled on the other side. So one of the things that needs to be there is the client needs to know what type of stuff the server is sending. That's called Mime Type. MIME type. I'll write really big. So obviously the MIME part stands for something. But stands for a big long sentence, but we just need to know what it is here. And we have text encoded data. It's encoded in Unicode form. So our first part of the MIME type is always going to be how it's encoded. Is it text? Is it binary? Is it base 64? Lots of different ways we can encode stuff. And then slash, and then what type of data are we encoding? So in this case, CSS. Another common one would be base 64 /PNG. We typically encode ping image files. And I always like to put the closing slash on the standalone tags. That is not necessary in HTML, but in some of our other markup languages, it is. and they keep trying to add it to the standard. So that connects to it. We really just need to worry about these two, the relevance and how to find it. Where to find it and how to retrieve the data. That's what's in the hyperlink reference part. So I say this is probably going to turn that whole background green. Yeah, so that covered the whole page without any sort of problem. To just simulate the error, because sometimes it'll do it on the body. So I put it in that content tag. Is that not what I put it at? Oh. So there's the problem. Put in this tag called content, and it sort of recognized it, even showed up in the predictive text, but content just doesn't seem to be doing anything, right? It's acting strange. If I select it, says it has a background color down here, but there's no other style rules to it. So we can make up our own names like that. But the thing is, there's nothing, no defaults to it. The client, Google Chrome running locally on my machine here, doesn't know what to do with that tag. Whereas other tags, it would know what to do with. So we can make up our own names for usefulness, but at least for now, maybe put that off until doing a little bit more in the background stuff. There you go. So now I should be able to change the color of that. In particular, I like to say, you should probably know server-side scripting. That way you can send any rules that apply to your custom tags. Just fill up the whole thing. Okay, yeah. So here's the issue that I encounter sometimes. And I've seen it happen on body tags periodically, especially if we start using gradients. It'll do it on the body tag as well. That's it doesn't take up the whole web page. We're like, okay, you need to turn the entire background green. Well, this is all the space we need, so I'm only going to make this part green. So one thing is that main tag is inside of the body tag, which is inside of the HTML tag. So the body tag is a child of the HTML tag, or that terminology goes the other way. The HTML tag is a parent of the body tag, and the body tag is a parent of the main tag, and we get inheritance. That's part of the name for cascading. So rules that we apply up here, such as setting the minimum height to 100%, usually fix stuff like that. Not when to fix it yet. Not everything will inherit, so we do have to watch it. Because if I come down here and set minimum height to 100% down here, it's still not expanded. So it doesn't realize how big the body is. So that little error can creep in, and with CSS, you kind of have to watch for stuff like that. Let's say something that's so maybe instead of percents, let's try something bigger in size. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So how many lines are in the web page here? Maybe 50 lines? I'm just guessing. You try something like this. Set our minimum size of That didn't make it any bigger. If I do 150, will that fix it? It doesn't seem to be affecting it all the way into the content tag. And that's just something you have to watch with. Sometimes things won't change like we expect them to. If I click on that main tag, we can see the rules for it. So this is how it's displayed. It doesn't seem to be inheriting anything. We have a margin on those. We'll talk about what this picture means very, very soon. The margins and borders, adding actual size. Yeah, nothing's inheriting right now for some reason. So don't need to worry about that because it's not going to fix the problem. Sometimes they're in the inspector with those style rules that I was just looking at there on the right. We'll see the words inherited from, and we'll get something from elsewhere. But it takes a little bit of back and forth sometimes to find things like if you want this to fill up the whole page. I'm gonna have to explicitly say inherit. Huh. I was expecting that to work. Why did that not go through? Well, I'm going to move on to another point. Sometimes CSS will not do the things we expect it to do. There's ways to predict all this stuff. It's definitely mathematically predictable, but it will act funny at times. Maybe I can try that on the body tag. 100% here. Let's see if this fills up the whole page. Nope, still not filling up the whole page. And that's something that you're going to experience over and over and over and over again this semester. Is like, okay, this is supposed to be the background. It needs to fill up the whole page, but it's not filling up the whole page. And well, like I just said, it's mathematically predictable how these things are going to work, but it's very complicated mathematically. So sometimes, most times it becomes easier just to try stuff. Okay, so inheriting's that not working, so let's try something different. Oh no, let's try 120 lines tall. Is that how big the page is? There we go. Oh wait, it's at least fills up everything that can be seen. But if you look over at the scroll bar, you'll see a problem that method gave us. This 120 lines is way bigger than we need here, at least for now. Let's see what 45 does. That's at least a little scroll bar, but it fills up the whole page. And throughout the semester, you're going to do a lot of that as you bring your homework sites together, just trial and error. Or really when you're project. When you get to the final project, you're going to be doing a lot more of that. When you're making websites in the long run, you can do a lot more of that. I guess the homework assignments out of the textbook, they tell you what to write each time. Which is things like the next thing to look at is colors. We need some other colors to put in there. If we start selecting things. This section tag would be the next one. So there's a section tag right there. try a yellow color on that. Okay, so that adjusted that. Fix the color. That's probably not the color we're gonna take down. But those are common names of colors. There's a whole lot of them. We looked at this the other day. And this is the place where you'll go to the trial and error. Go to the inspector and whatever browser you're testing in, and under sources, you can change it in live time. So if we select the CSS file, then we can try different named colors here. Going red, or there's the whole predictive list here. Something brown. Try different colors. And that's the place to do a lot of trial and error, because you'll see it changing immediately. The thing to note though is remember that that is not the saved file. So if you find the numbers and colors and all that if you want, make sure you copy it over to the actual saved version. And there's a lot of trial and error honing in on that the correct little color, which is one of the points we're going to talk about next Monday, which is some design features. We'll kind of introduce some concepts of design. How we set out our white space, how we align our colors, different things like that. That is a very, very big field to get into. The idea of how different colors appeal to different humans. So as we start looking at colors, that's something you might want to spend a little time looking into. If you just go Google color theory, color theory is a huge branch of psychology. There is a lot of research that's been done into how colors affect human perception. You're probably familiar with a couple of them. At least the red and yellow make people want to buy food. My fast food logos all have red and yellow on them. But it has a big impact on people. So if we're doing something like website design, definitely going to want to keep in mind the effect the color is going to have. Fonts, like we saw the other day, will also have big effects. Those sharp corners or decorative little flair, the serifs, or fully decorative fonts are going to have a much different effect on people. So we'll keep things like that in mind. We'll talk about some design concepts next Monday. But I just used some name colors here. That's not the only ways we have to set up colors. And name colors you have to be careful with because they will look different machine to machine. If you have a couple machines handy, give that a try. Use some name colors on one of your machines, then load that same file on a different machine, and you will see the differences between them. Let's see. So, I'll start with hexadecimal. I'm going to write some stuff on the board here just to make a list of different ones we can have. I'm going to erase this. This was just a side note of showing what it looked like when we only had one type of division tag for our page. We get to be a mess. And the Mime Type, I was just mentioning that because it doesn't seem to be covered anywhere else in the SDEV curriculum until an assignment in the mobile app development course where the instructions say include the Mime Type. And it's not covered anywhere before that course, so I always like to mention it. So there's lots of ways to do colors. Lots of ways to assign colors. Just like in the homework. Oh, that color assignment was easy, right? You just read the instructions and they say, okay, type these characters in and that will give you the color it's supposed to be. It's the color that matches the picture printed in the textbook. We kind of want to develop an understanding of it, not just copy the instructions, right? So first off, I'm going to do as a function. There's functions we can call that will just define the colors. A little side note, way back in elementary school or somewhere, you probably heard mix red, yellow, and blue to get all your colors, right? But there's, and then at some point later, I'm guessing everybody's heard this based on our society. If not, this is what we're getting ready to talk about. What I'm going to say here in a moment is to get all our colors, we mix red, green, and blue. It seems like there's a contradiction there. Like, well, way back when we were in elementary school, it goes to mix yellow, even though we definitely knew about the color green back then. And just some clarification points on that. It's not actually red, yellow, and blue. That one should be magenta, yellow, and cyan. And this is red, green, and blue. I can go ahead and spell it out here. And the difference between the two is how the light reaches our eye. So it's two situations. I'll draw like a little stick man. He's got his eye here, maybe looking at some tree off in the distance. So in this situation, standing outside, the light is coming from the sun, would hit the tree, and then reflects back into his eye. So we're seeing reflected light. So when we look at reflected light, we mix magenta, yellow, and cyan to get those. This is the work of the physicist Clark Maxwell around the 1840s or so. And back in elementary school, we learned red, yellow, and blue because little kids probably don't know words like magenta and cyan. We got to stick with the words that the 5 and 6 year olds know. Another way we can look at see light is maybe if we're indoors and there's a little light bulb with some colors to it. I'll do something like that to indicate colors. I only brought the black markers with me today. And in this case, we can see that colored light. We see the light directly from the source. And when we mix source light to find colors, we're mixing values of red, green, and blue. If you're interested in that sort of thing, it's as far as like the physics behind it and stuff, look into James Clerk Maxwell. A famous physicist. If you say Maxwell, put in Maxwell, you'll probably pop up his name right near the top. So with computers, obviously, it's an illuminated screen. That's how we work on our monitors. So we're looking at source light. So we deal with mixing red, green, and blue colors. So that's the name of our function for the first one, is RGB. And then we put in some number for those values. A number between 0 and 255. I'll do this 0, 255 to 0 would be explicitly green, very green. Not really the color we would call green. Be like, really bright one. Might as well show that on the screen, actually. So that's the first way that we can get consistent ones. And unlike the named colors, so RGB, and it's a pre-built function. We're asking the computer to do something. And parentheses next to a name are almost our standard symbol in programming to do something. Then we need 3 values. So like 0, 255, 0 is there's no red, all green, and no blue. So red, green, blue in the order, just like the letters indicated there. So now when I reload that, it's like a really bright lime color. So that's the all green. Probably don't want colors like that. We find some sort of mix between them. So like what we would normally call a forest green is just a little bit of red. 0 is none, and 255 is all. So if we did all zeros, I guess I could do that real quick. All zeros means none of any color, so that'll be black. And all 255s is all of every color, so that's white. And that is consistent for everything we're getting ready to talk about with colors. No colors is black, all colors leads to white. We probably want to mix somewhere in between them. Oh, and if all the digits are the same, it'll be a grayscale. That's not going to apply on HSV or HSD or HSL. Any of the HU ones, that's not going to apply. But if we're mixing the red, green, and blue, if they're all the same, so like 34, 34, 34 would be a dark gray because it's closer to 0. Or 234, 234, 234 would be a really light gray because it's closer to the white. So if all 3 are the same, we get the grayscale, and then we get other things when we mix them. And over time, you might memorize a few just from using them periodically. So like a forest green, which usually assign that number, that dark dense green sort of color, is usually a low amount of red, like high medium in the green, and then an amount of blue that almost matches the red there. Oh, maybe I meant more red than more than that. Let's try like 87 there, 87 there. Like sea green sort of color. Add lots more green, it would become forest green, so maybe somewhere around 220. We kind of mix and match our colors that way. That does not look the same on the TDM monitor. I'm looking at it back of the ring. But you want to try things, and that gives us much more consistency amongst our colors, device to device, than just the named ones. Which does not apply across the Zoom call. So obviously the Zoom call is just projecting the image of my screen, not processing the names of those colors. And we'll just kind of mix those. So like lots of red and green and just a little bit of blue. Gives us sort of a yellowish color. We swap that out, maybe just a little bit of red and lots of green and blue. Gives us this sort of the tealish things, really kind of more in the blue family. Blue is very, very prominent. Add some red to that, and See, it didn't really change that much at all. The blue is kind of overwhelming it. So adjusting that sort of thing. After you do it a while, you're used to some colors, but there are color pickers everywhere. If you just Google color picker, that'll work for now. Give you something to check with. You can kind of narrow down the color you want, like maybe you want a purple, find the shade of purple, and here's the decimal values for the RGB one, or the hexadecimal values. Oh, over to the purple. There we go. The RGB values, the hexadecimal values, or lots of different ways we can adjust the colors. More convenient when we won't see it for a couple weeks. We do have a color picker HTML element. Does it have to be in a form? Oh, not color. It's input type equals color. My mind was elsewhere for a minute. There we go. So there is an HTML element that gives us a color picker, which is really convenient. I always like that one because then the color picker is like displayed on the page you're trying to match colors for. So maybe put something purplish like over here, 153, 15, 63, or the HSL, the hexadecimal. Let me see different ones. 153, 15, 163. So come back over here and enter that. 147 is pretty close to that. I already got the numbers. 15, 163. So almost no green. Maybe 22 and just a little bit of blue. Just something purplish. I'm just throwing random colors up here for now. Not really trying to style it. We are going to talk about design and styling and stuff next week. Just looking at how to make the colors. And that HTML color picker, we won't see that for a couple weeks, but I think that's really, really useful because then you can stick it on the page right next to where the colors you're trying to match are. It's a lot easier to match things and you can see both of them at the same time. So put that in there. It's just input type equals color. Yeah, I'll leave it in there for now. It's not hurting anything. We can also expand that a little. That's an awful dense color, right? It's very, very solid. We can also add some transparency. And transparency, we use what's typically called an alpha value, which tells how opaque or transparent it is. That's going to be a number somewhere between 0 and 1, so it's a percentage. We just give a value for alpha, and that tells us what it is. But as you're probably well aware, we don't have an alpha key on the keyboard. We're Americans. We don't really have the Greek letters there, so we just use an A. But it's traditionally referred to as an alpha value. Transparency is referred to as alpha value beyond computer stuff. So that's the overall one. But we don't have an alpha here, so we put an A in our function, which would take in the same values. So a little bit of red, maybe mid amount of green, small amount of blue. I'll do a very small amount of blue. And then an alpha value for the A is some percentage. 0.75 or 75%. Because the CSS knows what the percent sign means. And that can be a lot easier for us to read at times. It makes the percent sign makes numbers seem more meaningful to humans because we're used to seeing percents. So to do that, we have like RGB. I'll leave that one on there and I'll do something else. So, oh, I should probably share my screen. So to apply this color, yeah, I'll do it this way. So I'll put this color on a paragraph. So we have our paragraph selector. I'm going to expand that here in just a second. Very in the background color, we'll set that to the red, green, blue alpha, and then give some numbers. What do I make up on the board? 47, 182, 7. 47, 182, 7, and then either 0.75 or can directly type 75%. That gave us something sort of greenish. It's kind of strange there, right? Because where it's in front of the purple, it looks very different than where it's in front of the other green. Y'all have probably seen those in optical illusions and stuff, right? There've been some very popular ones circling social media sites over the past year. I think there's even more than one Reddit channel dedicated to those, where put somebody in like take a picture of somebody in a blue dress or something, and then change the background on her, and it looks like a completely different color, just because of what's around it. And that's because we're seeing it's having an effect, and we're seeing more of that background pop through here. So if we change this to like 25%, it's just 75%. I'll type the percent sign this time. Like 25%, we're not going to see much at all of it. It's just there's something different surrounding the paragraphs. And now the next thing I wanted to talk about today is we also have different types of selectors. There are different ways of selecting things. So far, we've only used the tags. We have unique ways to identify it. We'll get to those. I think we'll get to those today, since time seems to be rolling along pretty good with the amount of stuff on the to-do list. Maybe we want to put that color on these paragraphs up there in front of the purple, but not on the green ones. So we have a way to signal those out. I'll point to the picture up here. Those paragraphs, that purple has to do with this section tag. So there's some paragraphs in there. We went on those, but not on the other paragraphs. So we can do that parent-child relationship in our selectors as well by just space delimiting things. So instead of just a paragraph selector, if we say section space paragraph, I will only select the paragraphs in the section tags to kind of narrow that down a little. You can see that top part didn't change, but the other part stays, it removed that effect from there. So that's one of the biggest advantages of these containers. And like the div, back when it was all div tags, we could set classes and IDs on them. That was on your homework that was due a few minutes ago. So even though we haven't talked about it in class yet, I feel like I mentioned in it because it was on the homework that was due a few minutes ago, but we'll talk about them in detail, whereas the instructions in the textbook are like type these words. So we'll see what those words mean. But we could identify all of our different divisions of the page separately, and then use that inheritance selection to identify things inside of there. Basically, we have multiple ways to select things. Do I have anything else in my notes about RT? Okay, that was all I had in my notes about RGB. So next I want to talk about what are the U ones. It looks like it's probably a good time to take a break, right? Does 10 minutes sound good to everybody?
Sounds good.
So yeah, let's take a 10-minute break. This clock on the machine over here says 2:11. So we will get back to it at 2:21. I'll see y'all in just a moment, and then we'll talk about U. We'll talk about U saturation and lightness or luminosity. There's a few versions that are very similar, and it's what artists say is much more intuitive after you've got the little practice. I'll see y'all in just a few minutes.